You're locked in to the hottest station on the planet.
Resistance is futile. The revolution has begun.
You're listening to Rebelpreneur Radio, helping you break the rules and build the business you need for the life you want. And now, broadcasting his pirate signal
from somewhere beyond the status quo,
here's your host, best-selling author, marketing and media strategist, Ralph Brogden.
Hello and welcome to Rebelpreneur Radio. It's the show that helps you build the business you need so you can live the life you want. I'm Ralph Brogden. You know, as an entrepreneur, you have to really overcome limiting beliefs, it seems like, every single day of your life as you're trying to build that business and live the life that you want to live. There's lots of obstacles, lots of challenges. Most of them are happening right there in your own head. Getting over those limiting beliefs so that you can truly build a business that's going to make a difference and live the life that you want to live. Now, different people have different limitations. Some are limited by their beliefs. Others are born into a very negative environment. And so they have more that they have to overcome. It's not impossible, but it's a lot more difficult for someone, for example, who is trying to overcome drug and alcohol addiction. Today's expert has been there, he's done that, and now he's dedicated his life to helping others. I'm speaking today with Mark Crandall. He is a therapist, a transformational life and business coach. He's a keynote speaker, and he's the author of Embrace Your Past, Win Your Future. He's also the host of Purpose Changers podcast. So Mark went from a lost boy with countless traumatic experiences, drug addiction, prison, and undying self-hatred to building multiple six-figure coaching practices. And he's become one of the top clinical interventionists and recovery specialists, and he leads life-changing workshops where he empowers others to break free from their limiting beliefs towards creating the lives of their dreams. Mark, it's a real pleasure to have you on Rebelpreneur Radio. Welcome.
Ralph, thanks for having me. And that the intro music got me amped up. I had to mute my mic because I was behind my computer flailing. So that's a really good intro.
Well,
so
awesome.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
It helps to have a guest on who has a great story because it's so inspiring to see where people have come from. You have had a very interesting background. As we said in the introduction, drug addiction, prison. You've gone through more than we can possibly imagine, most of us, and yet you are building you have built a successful coaching practice as a therapist, and you are a licensed social worker. You're actually transforming people's lives. Tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you come from, and what is your history?
Yeah, so it's Ralph has researched me a bit, so he knows it's a real loaded question, and I could easily take up the time of the show, but I don't want to. So I'll give you a real Cliff's Notes version. So at age 3, my biological sister and I were taken by DCYF. There was a lot of childhood trauma. I was handcuffed, locked in a closet, burned with cigarettes, later placed in foster care of 2 really loving parents, and was just lost and confused and angry as a child as I tried to make sense of what had happened to me. And it really escalated for me. And I, started using substances at the age of 13. That's after my adopted parents filed a CHINS petition on me and had me placed in a group home, rightfully so, because I was out of control. And I'm going to speed it up. So there was, 3 years of homelessness and then a bunch of incarcerations, a lot of criminal activity, which led me to prison in 2005. And when I was about to be released from prison in 2007, that's when I really started to contemplate what I was doing in life. I mean, I'd spent so much of my time and energy trying to not be like my biological parents, but here I was in what I believed to be worse off than they had ever become. And I was about to be released to a drug and alcohol treatment facility, yet I didn't, draw a sober breath while I was in prison. And so I was scared, and, I was guided to go to the self-help section of the library, and I became very, very obsessed with transformational work. Got out of prison with a GED and went back to painting and drywalling because I believed in my mind that that was all I was ever going to be able to do with my criminal record and, kind of the cards that I was dealt. And, in my apartment, 2 years out of treatment and 3 years released from prison, I was super depressed because, I grew up in New Hampshire, and in the winter, the snow flies and work dries up. And so painters and drywallers are, often out of work. And so there I was sitting there contemplating how I was going to live by this new way of life and pay my rent. And, through meditation practice and, at the time I was reading just as much personal development material as I possibly could consume, I was guided to go to school. And, I got my bachelor's degree in human services, my master's degree in social work. And it just took off, became absolutely obsessed. And to this day, I'm absolutely obsessed. I am a workaholic, but not to the point that it hinders my life, as a family man, a father. And I believe that it'll become an issue for me once my wife says something. So,
and we were just talking offline about the fact that you've just welcomed a new member to your family very recently.
Absolutely, yeah. Little Mark made his appearance on the 13th of June. So today, at the recording of the show, he's 5 weeks old. And, you want to talk about limiting beliefs before having a child. With the upbringing that I had a lot of them, and they're all, as with most limiting beliefs, whether they're my own or the work that I do with others, are made up.
That's a really powerful testimony. And I hope this encourages and motivates people. I don't know where you are in your business, where you are in your life, but most people are not going to have to overcome the things that Mark has had to overcome to get to where he is. So, Mark, you pulled yourself up through personal development. You found a direction, you found a focus, and you began this process of helping others. Now, a lot of social workers are employed. You are actually building six-figure coaching practices. Tell us about that distinction. What sent you in that direction as opposed to just working for social services or just taking a job someplace? How did you become the entrepreneurial? How did that apply?
So I just want to, what I do want to state is six figures is such a broad term, right? Because you're really looking at almost 1 million numbers or 900,000 numbers once you get to six figures, right? So, in my first 5 months of business, I made $110,000, just to give you kind of some perspective of the six figures that we're talking. And my success has increased. So it's a funny story. So I had been, since I started my undergraduate degree, I'd worked in the field of human services. I started working with runaway and homeless youth and providing in-home therapy to court-ordered families. And I got a job offer. I was working in New Hampshire. I had been for about 7 years. I got a job offer to come to Austin, Texas to work at a drug and alcohol treatment center. And I remember the conversation that I had with my wife, and I was like, hey, do you want to move to Austin? I just got to, whatever. I'm paraphrasing, but I just got this job offer. Of course, she knew about it all. And I was like, do you want to move to Austin? And she was like, yes. And I was like, I guess I have to give you the disclaimer that I don't know if I'm going to stay at this job. I don't know if I want to work in the treatment industry. She was like, okay, let's go. I hate winter. Let's go. So we moved. I'd been working at this treatment facility for about 6 months. It was very, very below my, I wouldn't say below my means. It wasn't challenging. Wednesday afternoons through Friday afternoons, I was twirling my thumbs, hoping that there was a crisis. So I had some work to do. And I attended this networking event, we'll call it. It was a transformational workshop, but there was a networking event after. And I overheard this man, his name's Nathaniel. I give him shout outs almost every interview I do about business. And I overheard him talking to a woman behind me, and he was talking about how he had converted a Sprinter van into a mobile home, and he wholesaled land to create passive income so that he could live out of his van and do what he wanted when he wanted. And he called it a laptop lifestyle. And I just got goosebumps when I shared that. And because the man changed my life. And so I went up to my wife and I was like, hey, I'm getting this intuition, this intuitive thought, which is like when your heart speaks and your mind usually tells you, no, that's a bad idea. So I went up to my wife and said, hey, I'm being guided to ask that dude over there out to dinner. Are you okay with that? She's like, yeah, absolutely. She's like, I go, it feels weird. She's like, I don't think it's weird. So I sit down with him. We go grab a burger. And I don't know anything about this dude other than he lives in a van and he's doing something called creating passive income, and he's wholesaling land. And I don't know any of this because I'm so ingrained in the 9-to-5 work till you retire mentality, and also the belief systems that social workers are taught. And that is that we should live just above the means of our clients. And so we should get paid. Social workers get paid very, very crappy. And which I didn't believe, but I didn't have a clue how to break out of it. So I meet this man and he's like, hey, what do you do? And I'm like, I'm a therapist and, I work for this treatment center and And he's like, hey, he stops me mid-sentence. He goes, better question. What do you want to do? And it was like, in second grade when the teacher goes around the room and asks you what you want to be when you grow up, it's like I lit up for the first time. I was like, I want to write a book and I want to speak on stage and I want to do this and I want to do this and I want to get out of therapy and I want to start working with people in positive psychology, philosophy, and da-da-da. And I'd been obsessively studying positive psychology for a while. And he's like, oh, cool. He's like, so you're an entrepreneur. I'm like, I don't know what that is. And I didn't. And I just straight said to him, I was like, what is that? And he's like, oh, you want to own a business. It's like, I wouldn't know where to begin. He's like, oh, that's fine. He said, he goes, here's what I want you to do. And this was the end of the meal. He goes, I'm staying in a parking lot in Barnes & Noble. He said, meet me there tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. I had no idea that 6 a.m. was his test to see if I was hungry. I was there at 5:30. I had a notebook. I had my laptop. I had no idea. It was a Sunday morning too. And I'm like, I have no clue. And we sat outside the Barnes & Noble, filed my LLC. Nathaniel mentored me. I called it mentoring at the time. I now know it's coaching for free for 5 weeks. He left to go back to Colorado to, I don't know if he was acquiring more land or what, but he went back to Colorado and he said, I'll be back in about 6 months and we're going to find out if you're an entrepreneur. And he gave me all the systems. He told me what books to read. I had created a vivid vision, which is something Cameron Harold created. And I just was like ready to launch but had no clue what to do. Right. So the thing that stuck in my mind is he said, you're not a business owner until you cash your first check. So I was like, I need to get a client. I need to set up coffees and close somebody. And I had no clue how to sell. I didn't think. And, I just started doing what he taught me and I researched more and I got connected to some entrepreneurs in Austin. And I just started researching and studying. And he came back after 6 months and he said, all right, now's the test. Open your bank account. And I opened my bank account and he saw what was in there and he just goes, I don't know if I can swear on here, so I won't. He just goes, holy crap, dude. I was like, what? And he's like, do you even realize what you just did? I was like, no. He's like, what are you doing with this money? And I was like, I don't know. My wife and I are good. He's like, what? He's like, well, what are you going to do? I'm like, I'm just going to keep doing this, dude. I love it. And I have new goals because I completed everything that we had mapped out on the Vivid Vision and da-da-da-da-da. And so I said, but you can't work with me for free anymore. I need to pay you. And he's like, yeah, I agree. You definitely need to pay me. And,
so you passed the test then. You passed the entrepreneurial test.
I just haven't stopped. I mean, we'll get into it, but I just haven't stopped. People wouldn't book me to be a keynote. So I created my own event. booked my own keynote, hired a videographer, like created my first speaker reel. My second one's being worked on right now. But, it's just like, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like where there's a will, there's a way. And just because somebody says no or society says no as a testament to my story, that doesn't mean it's accurate. You might have to jump over more hurdles than the average person, but you can do it.
That's such an amazing story of transformation. And it also speaks to the power of coaching. And so your first coach is a little bit unorthodox, not the sort of, not the type of coach that you see being advertised on Facebook every day. But I think the big takeaway from your story is that he helped you to produce a result that changed your life. And now you're using that knowledge to build a business, that is actually making a difference in people's lives. Talk to us about the similarities between the mindset of someone who is struggling with drug and alcohol addiction and the mindset of someone who is trying to break free from their limiting beliefs. Are there some similarities there?
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, everyone has stories that they've created throughout their lives about themselves. And so the number one thing that I can give your audience is when you get really honed into those stories that you've created about yourself, you do some introspective work, and then you lay out an action plan against what your mind is telling you. You won't believe that you can achieve it, but when you start to take those actions and then you begin to disprove your mind, those stories are going to make no sense. Like they're really not. And I'll share you a Cliff's Notes version of a story that like really, this is when I took off in New Hampshire. So I was working, like I said, as a runaway and homeless youth social worker. I was doing in-home therapy. I wanted to get hired by the state. My mentor at the time told me, with your record, you'll never get hired. My colleagues told me, with your, felony record, you'll never get hired. I said, you know what? I'm sick of this. And at the time I was reading all kinds of personal development books. So I was like, that's crap. No, I'm going to do it. I was like, well, I'm going to apply. And the worst they're going to say is no. But I mean, it's really not that bad because I've been telling myself no anyways. At least I'm going to gain experience from the interview. So I get an interview, killed it. Second interview, killed it, got hired. Worked there for about 6 months, the big newspaper in New Hampshire, for whatever that's worth. It's not a big state, so it's a pretty small paper, but they reached out to the director of the facility to ask to interview me. And she said no, and she wouldn't let me interview. My mentor said, if they reach out on a Friday, know that they're about to put that in print on Sunday morning. So they reached out on Friday. And, I couldn't answer. And so, he called me Saturday afternoon. He's like, look, it's going to go live on the website tonight, brace yourself, So I go on Saturday night and I read it and it crippled me. It just brought me right back to like all the progress that I had gained. It just diminished in that moment. And I did my practices and I called some other individuals that were in my life for accountability, and I just shared with them, and I went to the grocery store the next morning and bought the paper and sat in the car and read it. And the headline was "Convicted Burglar Counsels Youth." And I read the article again, and there was so much hope in there for those that don't believe that they can do stuff. And I finally saw like that everything in my life happened for me, not to me. Everything happened for me so that I could be a vessel to show the world that they can achieve anything that they want. That's when it all changed for me. And so, yeah, the only way, there's a lot of noise out there. And you mentioned, I want to rabbit hole on this. You can stop me if you want, because it's your show. There's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of people posing in front of Teslas and Lamborghinis that are giving, this entrepreneur lifestyle, this look that's just not accurate. It's just not. No one's showing, like, they're not showing you them, smashing their MacBook Pros and throwing them out the window. They're not showing you crying. They're not like, entrepreneurship is not for the weak of heart. It's for resilient individuals that are willing to invest in themselves so that they can invest in others. And, you mentioned coaching. One thing that I will never hesitate to do is spend money on my personal development or to build my business further. I just won't hesitate because I don't believe that this business is of me, right? It's my business is my buddy Pete who's he's one of my best friends. He said it in the #1 Purpose Chasers interview that I did, the first episode. I asked all my guests, if they could leave one message with the world, what would it be? And he said, yeah, I'm in the business of building relationships. And if I effectively build relationships, my business gets built.
Wow.
And that's what it is. So
yeah. What a powerful distinction there. You are the author of Embrace Your Past, Win Your Future. It's available on Amazon and also on Audible. The subtitle of that book is The Difference Between Being a Victim and Playing One. Just explain that. What does that mean? What is the difference between being a victim and playing one?
So I'm a victim of circumstances. Like, things happen to me, right? So that I'm a victim, right? I'm a victim of those circumstances. Things happen to me. Things happen to everyone. Every single listener, in your audience right now, some things happen to them. Like, everyone on this earth has some things, that are their things that they don't want to share or they keep buried down, right? The difference between being a victim, which I am, right? Things happen to me that shouldn't happen to any child. I hope my child, never goes through that. And playing one, which is I blame my current circumstances or my future outcomes based off of things that happened in the past that I have no control over. I can't change them. But what I can do is change my perception surrounding who I am and the stories that I've created about myself as a result of those things happening.
Wow, that's a very powerful distinction. So there are genuine cases where, and you're a great example, and things that's happened in my childhood and other people, where we literally had no control over. But we do have control over how we choose to respond to that and what we do now. And I think that's probably built into the title of the book, Embrace Your Past, Win Your Future. Is the difference between realizing that, we all have things that we've experienced that we didn't choose and that it wasn't our fault. But that doesn't mean that we have to continue playing a victim the rest of our life.
You don't have to. In this moment, you have a decision, right? Everyone does. Every day that I wake up, I can choose to go back there, or I can choose to move forward.
Excellent. Do you have something like a self-help process or maybe a 2 or 3 steps that people who recognize themselves, they recognize themselves in the stories that you're telling, they've got some limiting beliefs. What can you say to them that they could begin seeing a positive difference even as they're listening to this program?
Totally. And I mapped this exercise and many more out in Embrace Your Past, Win Your Future. But when you've created a story about who you believe you are, you're receiving some kind of reward, some kind of you're receiving some payout, some payoff, if you will, some reward for continuing to be that person or continuing to live in that story. So for me, I was lazy. I got to tell myself I wasn't smart, right? I didn't have to do much. I didn't really have to live up to any responsibility. I could fall on my face and it was okay because, these things happened to me. So you have that. Everyone has that. When you can get really dialed into what that's actually costing you and the cost outweighs what you're receiving from it, then you can outline a game plan of action to overcome the limiting belief. Does that make sense?
That does. That makes a lot of sense.
So what it was costing me was everything, really, right?
Yeah.
Like when I wrote a list out, the pros, cons, it was costing me everything.
And I wonder how much that's really costing us in terms of business that's lost, relationships that are lost, life experiences that are lost, because we create these stories about who we are. And I guess, like you say, we do hang on to them because they are giving us something. We think that they're giving us something. Maybe they're giving us attention from other people or pity or people willing to help us or encourage us or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, we're not getting all that we can get out of ourselves. And those stories are actually costing more than they're worth. So you're saying what we need to do is create a new story. How do we do that?
By taking action against your current story, right? So like since I was 18 years old, I wanted to write my memoir, right? So ever since I read A Child Called It by David Peltzer, who was also adopted, also had a lot of trauma, I wanted to write my book, and I would start writing my books. I started writing my book probably 15 or 20 times, and then I would stop. And what I thought was I lacked motivation. But those individuals that start things don't lack motivation. People that lack motivation don't start things. So what I actually found out I lacked was the belief in myself to fulfill on what I wanted to create in life, right? So I would start telling myself that no one was going to buy it. Well, no one's going to buy it if you don't write it, right? And like, what are they going to think of me? Well, they can't think anything worse of me than I already think of myself, right? And like, you just start to debunk all of these stories and take action against them. And I think the number one thing that individuals can invest in is accountability. So who you surround yourself with is who you become. And I just happen to be very, very selective of who I surround myself with, because I'm playing at such a high level that I can't tolerate, or I can't live at the level that I'm striving towards if I'm surrounding myself with people that are going to co-sign my limiting beliefs.
I love that. That's very nicely put. Very nicely put. And it all has to do with the stories we create about ourselves and who we surround ourselves with. And I guess they could either reinforce those stories and bring us down, or they can help us to take action against those stories. I really love that. It's more than just hoping and wishing. We actually have to take action to get to where we want to be. So this has really been inspirational, and I hope it's been motivational to our listeners. Whatever you're struggling with, someone else has been there before, and someone else has overcome something just as bad and probably even worse than what you are experiencing right now. So take a lesson from Mark Crandall. He is a therapist, a clinical interventionist, keynote speaker, and is the author of Embrace Your Past, Win Your Future, which is available on Amazon and on Audible. You can find out more about Mark at markcrandall.net. Mark, it's been a real pleasure to have you on Rebelpreneur Radio today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Ralph. It's been an amazing interview.
You've been listening to Rebelpreneur Radio with Ralph Brogden. Download the show notes and much more at rebelpreneur.com.